The expedition to Sicily was the worst military disaster in Athenian history, and now Athens itself was in turmoil. Treacherous oligarchs conspired to undermine her democracy, while the traitor Alcibiades had defected to Sparta. In the east, Achaemenid Persia looked upon the Greek world with ambitious eyes, seeing an opportunity to exploit the perpetual infighting in the Hellenic world to advance their own interests. The second phase of the Peloponnesian War was about to begin. This series on the Peloponnesian War is kindly sponsored by our YouTube members and patrons, and the series has been initially released as an exclusive for our supporters. Right now, the patrons and YouTube members are watching our first Punic War and Pacific War series, while the series on the history of Prussia and Italian unification wars, Risorgimento, have been concluded, and our series on the Russo-Japanese War and Albigensian Crusade and Xenophon's Anabasis will be released next. You can join their ranks via the links in the description and pinned comment to get exclusive videos, early access to all public videos, see our schedule, access a special Discord server in which we are very active, and much more. Thank you for supporting us, we couldn't be doing it without your help. As the triremes from her Sicilian expedition were set alight upon the Mediterranean Sea, Athens was utterly ruined. Thousands of Athens' working and fighting age population had been lost in that doomed campaign, and her people were furious at the pro-war politicians who had brought this disaster upon their city. During the war, the arch-traitor Alcibiades had advised Sparta to take over Decelea in Attica and set up fortifications to starve the population. As a result of this, the silver mines and fertile agrarian hinterlands of Athens diminished in revenue due to the Spartan fortifications limiting access. On the pan-Hellenic stage, Athens was weaker than ever, and her control over her allies and vassals had never been so feeble. Meanwhile, Sparta had been buoyed by Athens' humbling, and its pro-war faction was gaining in popularity and power. However, as weakened as Athens was, it was still the dominant naval power in the Aegean Sea, with even Sparta's new allies in Syracuse not being enough to tip the balance in that theatre of the arms race. To compensate for this critical shortcoming, Sparta swallowed its pride and asked for financial assistance from someone they normally despised, Achaemenid Persia. The King of Kings probably no longer aspired to conquer all of Hellas, as his predecessor Xerxes had 2 generations earlier. Still, he hoped that by destabilizing Athens, the Achaemenids would gain access to the crucial shipping lane of the Hellespont. Thus, Sparta and Persia were a match made in Ahura Mazda and Zeus's heaven, as Persia could provide monetary support. According to Thucydides, the second phase of the war began the same way the first one did, with preemptive escalations on both sides. King Agis set forth to found a Spartan colony at Heraclea, where he could build a strategic location for controlling trade and supplies from the north. In addition, several rebellious cities under Athenian hegemony sent delegations to seek assistance against their Ionian overlord. Alcibiades advised the Spartans to slowly build alliances with the island allies of Athens, such as Chios, which they did. He himself, having come under pressure due to allegations of having a child with the wife of King Pleistoanax, proposed an alliance with a local satrap in Ionia called Tissaphernes to have a base away from Sparta and escape. This proved to be a fruitful partnership, for when Miletus was against Athens, Tissaphernes stepped in as a negotiator. Athens responded by sending ships and establishing a base of operations in the territory that revolted. Meanwhile, Alcibiades grew increasingly afraid of losing his privileged position in Sparta, as King Agis became impatient with his presence. These tensions came to a head when the Spartan general, Astilochos, was ordered to kill Alcibiades, prompting the turncoat to flee to Tissaphernes, who was growing anxious due to the Spartan rejection of the treaty. Alcibiades then extended an olive branch to the top brass of his erstwhile homeland, initiating talks with the Athenian upper classes, who had grown distrustful of their city's democratic institutions. To win the Athenian oligarchs over to his side, Alcibiades promised to bring them money from Persia, funds which the economically starved Athenians required. Alcibiades' envoys spread the news and made the arrival of Persian gold a done deal. The Athenian troops at Samos seemed intrigued by the idea, as were some of the generals. Alcibiades intended to engender enough support to initiate a double coup at Athens and Samos. Some generals, like Thrasybulus, were avowed democrats, but despite this, they saw Alcibiades as a possible solution to Athenian chronic political instability. Others, like Phrynichos, were not keen on him returning and maintained that Persia did not have Athenian interests at heart. Despite his concerns, he could not stop Alcibiades from setting his plans into motion. On the 14th day of the Attic month of Thargelion, June 9th, 411, the conspirators seized the reality of power. In Samos, the local insurrection was put down, but in Athens, the coup was successful, and the tyranny of the 400 was established, a faction which almost immediately fractured internally, splitting into moderate and extremist factions. The radical oligarchs began negotiations with Sparta, which angered the moderates, who had agreed to Alcibiades' plot solely to gain Persian money to fight against Sparta. Eventually, the radicals were removed in another coup, and the moderate Council of the 5,000 was established. It was during 411 BCE that Sparta deployed some of its ships to Eretria. Athens believed they were heading for Athens due to links with the Athenian oligarchs. The Athenians soon realized where the Spartans were going, and set forth to go to Evia, an important granary for the Athenians. The Spartans looked to Oropus as a safe harbour to take over the island, as they worked closely with their Boeotian allies. Athens manned its remaining ships, followed the Peloponnesians, and then met up with their powerful Eretrian allies in the region, resulting in a combined force of 36 ships. After landing at Eretria, the Athenian sailors moved out to procure supplies. Unbeknownst to them, they were about to be betrayed, for Eretria was now in cahoots with the Spartans. In a ploy to sabotage their Athenian allies, the Eretrians had arranged to empty the market that the Athenians would shop from, so they would have to go outside the city to acquire provisions. Then the Spartans intervened after a signal was set, possibly a walking Egyptian dance move by the Eretrian contingent. Agesandridas, the Spartan commander, immediately sailed to the city to engage the Athenians at sea. The Athenians dashed to their ships and weighed anchor. They fought at sea, but eventually the Athenians were forced to disengage and were confined to the shore. However, ominous news awaited them as the Eretrians supported the Spartans and massacred many of the soldiers. A total of 22 Athenian ships were captured, and their crews were captured or killed. This spelt the end of Athenian influence on Evia, with the entire island rising in revolt, except for Oreus. Soon, Sparta had taken over the isle and deprived Athens of one of its most crucial breadbaskets. The Athenian navy at Samos, which was a pro-democracy stronghold and an ally of Athens, was now in turmoil and sought to restore democracy in Athens. Though they considered him a traitor, they asked for Alcibiades to lead the army due to his previous reconnecting with them and his promises to help them. Around here, we must say goodbye to Thucydides, the historian whose records have been crucial in helping us chronicle the war. His text ends here rather abruptly, as he presumably died around 400 BCE before he could complete his magnum opus. His text showed a profound realism and a keen understanding of the suffering inherent in war, and scholars to this date debate his real character and philosophy. From now on, we will focus on sources from later authors, such as Xenophon or Plutarch. The moderate oligarchy in Athens now sought to secure grain imports from their other breadbasket, the Hellespont. However, even after winning victories in Cnosima and Abydos in 411 BCE, they continued to have issues securing total control of the region. Persia's navy was providing Sparta with assistance in blockading the Hellespont. The Persian satrap Pharnabazos controlled a significant cavalry force, which would become important in the land section of the battle, while the Spartan admiral Mindaros assembled a fleet of ships drawn from the entire Peloponnesian League, Diodorus Sikelos claims this united force comprised 80 ships, while Xenophon more conservatively claims it was around 60. The Athenian fleet, united under Alcibiades, was of similar strength, composed of 86 triremes. To avoid being locked inside the Hellespont, the Athenians moved into the Aegean and positioned themselves north of Gallipoli. Cyzicus was a city near the shores of Marmara, and the Spartan Navarchos, or naval leader, Mindarus, was keen to besiege and take it over. The Persian satrap Pharnabazos joined him with his cavalry, and they quickly forced the city into surrender. When the Athenians reached the Hellespont, they hid in the city of Abydos to hide their true arsenal from the enemy. The initial plans of Athens are described quite differently by Xenophon and Diodorus Sikelos. Xenophon describes that the fleet waited for heavy rain to approach the city of Cyzicus under cover of the downpour. Alcibiades took his squadron past the Peloponnesians, causing Mindarus to follow him. Alcibiades is said to have begun to land, and Mindarus came closer to do the same. Alcibiades is then claimed to have turned the ships around to chase Mindarus in a surprise attack, causing him to flee to a beach to the south of the town. The armies moved to the shore and began to fight. In this fight, Alcibiades emerged victorious, while Mindarus was killed. Syracuse fled by burning its ships, and everyone else was taken prisoner. Diodorus claims Athens tried to ambush the enemy by splitting into three. Alcibiades sailed into Cyzicus with 20 ships, and then was to sail back to bait the Peloponnesians. Theramenes and Thrasybulus then took their own ships and hid, before attacking and blocking the Peloponnesians from the shore. However, this did not work as the Athenians intended. When Mindarus chased Alcibiades and the ambush was triggered, the Peloponnesians fled inland to Cleri. There, they met up with Pharnabazos' cavalry forces. As the Athenians chased them, they ruined many Peloponnesian ships, and then used grappling harpoons to take over the ships on the shore. The battle then moved onto the land. Alcibiades and Mindarus surrounded the ships, and began to fight on land to take over the remnants of the Peloponnesian fleet. Diodorus says that in this clash, Mindarus was killed, and the Athenians seized the entirety of the Peloponnesian fleet. Xenophon quotes a Spartan dispatch home, which laconically mentions how "the ships are gone, Mindarus has disappeared, the men are hungry, we don't know what to do." Cyzicus fell within the next few days, and with its conquest, Athenian control over the Hellespont was fully reasserted. The string of lightning bolt victories in the Hellespont greatly boosted Athenian morale. The mood amongst the people of Athens was high, as they had now secured their breadbasket in the Hellespont. The moderate oligarchy was keen to capitalize on this victory, but not with further warfare. Instead, they considered a peace deal with Sparta, in which they would give over Pylos and secure their other gains elsewhere. The people and the Samian Democrats, however, were not having it. We're not sure how this unfolded, but we can assume that some local support flared amongst the people of Athens to restore democracy. We must also consider the class analysis, one that many philosophers of Athens disliked due to their elitism, that the 5,000 represented only the classes of the rich and the Zeugitai, whereas democracy represented the power of even the unpropertied lower classes of men. There is little detail of the democratic movement in Athens, but we can imagine the mass of the people slowly coming over to the idea of regaining power, as the fear of the Sicilian loss and the oligarchic chaos dawned upon them. Alcibiades and the other generals at Samos returned, and democracy was fully restored once more. They took harsh measures against tyranny, stopping the revision of old democratic laws, and bringing a grant to all citizens, called Diobelia, or gift of 2 obols. The Agora restored the Bully of the 500, but with limitations on legal punishment and crimes. The important use of the wording of the first laws after the restoration made it rhetorically clear that the democracy of Athens was back and ready to fight for its interests and values. They also instituted that attacks on democracy were illegal. Athens had bounced back from a disastrous campaign and economic and political chaos. The war, however, was not over yet. The Peloponnesian League was still out there, and the Athenian Empire was now trying to hold on to its newfound gains. Persia was now fully engaged in the war through Sparta as an ally and a proxy. The Peloponnesian War's second phase was now fully underway, and Athenian generals like Alcibiades were ready to continue the war. Time would tell if they would succeed or not. If you don't want to miss future episodes, make sure to subscribe and press the bell button. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive videos. Join the ranks of patrons and YouTube members via the link in the description or by pressing the button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, join our private Discord, and much more. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.